So House of the Dragon is back, and I just have to say that it hasn't been easy these last 2 years waiting for this third season to finally debut. Because if you can remember, the last season had ended pretty much with what I can only consider a cliffhanger, because the season was abridged. Instead of usual 10 episodes that we expect, we only got 8, as it was decided that the final battle, the Battle of the Gullet, was going to be moved to season 3 because of budgetary reasons. But in the interim time between then and now, we've gotten a lot of news about the production, and how almost everybody in the production team was pretty confident that the season was going to be worth the wait, that battle was going to prove that yes, it was good that it took a good bit of time to really develop it and really flesh it out and really bring it to life. So all that was finally unveiled in the first episode, which was titled Salt and Sea, Fire and Blood. So as I usually do with these recaps, I'm just going to be going over some events that stood out to me and giving my general thoughts, and we'll of course be touching on spoilers, so consider this your spoiler warning if you haven't seen that first episode. So the episode pretty much opens with Rhaena, who, as we can remember, was trying to secure her first dragon, the dragon nicknamed Sheep Stealer, and it actually opens with her attempting to ride it. And I just have to say that this scene was quite harrowing, just like thinking about the experience of riding a dragon for the first time, which kind of mirrors how Aemond felt when he had to ride Vhagar for the first time in season 1. This was a very good way to start the season and reminding us that dragons at the end of the day are these beasts that have a will of their own, and it's actually quite a feat trying to control them, and there are even those that believe that you actually don't control the dragons at the end of the day. And the fact that the Targaryens are able to ride them in the first place is what makes them who they are. Speaking of the Targaryens, we now move over to King's Landing, where Aemond learns that his brother, King Aegon, had gone missing. This immediately sets him off, and he starts to make inquiries, even threatening to behead one of the maesters, only for him to learn that he had fled with Lord Larys as well. We find out that Aegon and Lord Larys were eventually captured as they were trying to make their way to Essos, and Lord Larys, being the conniving bargainer that he is, convinces his captors to keep them as high-value prisoners, revealing who Aegon was in the process. And it remains to be seen how this particular plot thread will play out, but I have no doubts that we'll get to see more of this in the subsequent episodes of the season. Then over at Dragonstone, we have Rhaenyra having counsel about the ongoing conflict, and she actually starts to consider Alicent's offer, because if you remember, at the end of the last season, Alicent had pretty much offered to leave the gates open and provide the conditions for her to take over King's Landing with as little bloodshed as possible. So she's mulling over this, and it is clear that she doesn't really trust Alicent the way she did, but she also sees this as the only viable way to avoid the massive bloodshed that is sure to happen in this stage of the Civil War. Switching back to Rhaena, we can see that she starts to bond with Sheep Stealer, even though she still doesn't have full control of the dragon, which is a key detail that will come into play later on in the episode. Aemond, on the other hand, assumes the title of king, since Aegon had pretty much abdicated the throne, and he summons Alicent to the throne room in a very intimidating scene, and she immediately tries to start persuading him to follow through with the plan she had already set up with Rhaenyra behind their back. Basically, the idea was for her to send him over to Harrenhal so that Rhaenyra and her dragon riders can ambush him and pretty much take him out of the picture. So she's trying to convince him to ride over to Harrenhal, where Ulf and the remaining dragon riders are waiting. But Ulf gets spooked by the witch Alice, and he decides to head back to Dragonstone, where the witch says the battle has already begun in their absence. Alicent also forges a letter from King Aemon to the Hightower army, asking them to remain as calm, no doubt in a bid to minimize the amount of bloodshed that's going to happen, and she has to protect her house at the end of the day. And it is clear that all of this back maneuvering is still going to come back and bite her one way or the other. So all of this remains to be seen, but it's just interesting to see how she's still pulling the strings, even though she doesn't have the pull or the power that she once had. Over at the Gullet, Lord Corlys tries to patch things up with his son Alan, which from the moment the scene began, I could just tell that this was foreshadowing some kind of grief that is going to happen before the end of the episode, because you usually don't have two characters like this patching things up without one of the characters dying at the end of the day. So, and more or less this signaled the beginning of the Battle of the Gullet, because everything comes to a head when the leader of the Triarchy, Admiral Loha, rides in with her ships, who pretty much outnumber Lord Corlys and his forces, and he devises plans to split them up and even attack Lord Corlys' stronghold, just to draw him out and to really destabilize him during the battle. And it was made clear that there was a lot of beef and conflict between Admiral Loha and Lord Corlys. Because if you can remember, this was something that was set up from the very first episode of season 1, where we first learned about the Triarchy, but we just never actually got to put a face behind who the Triarchy was. And Admiral Loha more or less embodies the Triarchy at this point, as she rides into battle to meet them. And the battle, I have to say, was one of the bloodiest battles that we've gotten thus far in House of the Dragon and even Game of Thrones overall, because the battle was quite intense. There was a particular scene that stuck out to me where you could see the decks were pretty much red with blood, and you could just see all the bloodshed, all the people that are being gutted, which is what we were expecting from this battle. Back at Dragonstone, Baela brings word to Rhaenyra about the ongoing conflict, and Rhaenyra being Rhaenyra, she immediately moves to ride there to help them. But Jace decides to prevent her from doing this by ordering one of her guards to lock her in her room, and he instead decides to ride there with Baela to act as reinforcements. And once the dragons entered the fray, the battle was just kicked up to a whole new level, because it was just clear that these guys were already prepared for those dragons, as they even had like tools to shoot at them and anchor them to the ground. And there was a harrowing moment where it actually seemed like Vermax had been taken down and it was about to be pulled under the sea, before Baela eventually rides in and saves him at the last second. Then we also have Rhaena, who was riding back on Sheep Stealer to Dragonstone, only to spot the ongoing conflict in the distance, and she decides to ride there to help out. But because she had only just bonded with her dragon, she went there and found out that the dragon wasn't under her full control. The dragon was more or less acting out, and it was attacking pretty much all the ships and everybody, to the point that both Baela and Jace had to eventually fight her, and they realized that it was their sister and all that was going on in the midst of the battle. And this was the point where the dragons were having their own battle, just as the people on the sea were battling it out. And Lord Corlys devises a plan to lure Loha and her ship through a very narrow pass, where he hoped they'll be able to evade them or at the very least damage their ships. But Loha proved to be quite hardy, and she was able to make it past that particular point and eventually even boards their ship, with the battle continuing in full swing. And Lord Corlys was eventually knocked out into the water, and Alan jumps into the fray in a one-on-one battle with Loha, and Loha eventually succumbs to his strength as she is killed. And the episode ends with Vermax getting shot down and falling into the water, forcing Jace to dismount. But before he could swim to safety, he was slain by some archers. Damn! So I just have to say that this was a very poignant and powerful way to end the episode, with the death of Jace. And really, this showed that this conflict, this battle that they just fought, you couldn't really call it a victory either way. Because when you look at all the losses, like the loss of a dragon and the heir to the throne in one battle, like it was a battle that was definitely going to go down in history as one of the most fraught and bloodiest conflicts that they had to endure. And yeah, I have to say that overall, the fights, the choreography, the effects, everything really came together to really bring this battle to life. So I guess in a way it was worth the wait, but I couldn't escape the feeling that this felt less like an episode 1 of season 3 and more like the episode 9 of season 2 that we were deprived of. So a part of me is still kind of miffed about that fact. But overall, this signals a very strong start for a season, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to keep the momentum going, because we still have a lot, judging by what was shown in the weeks ahead preview, that is going to play out over the course of the season. And as we already know, heading into this show in the first place, it was going to be a very bloody civil war, and there were not going to be any clear-cut winners at the end of the day. So it's just a very nice time to be a Game of Thrones fan once again, coming off the strong first season of the Knights of the Seven Kingdoms, and now we have this very iconic battle being brought to life in this first episode of House of the Dragon. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how everything shapes up over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be going over those episodes whenever they air. Anyway, these are just my thoughts about the first episode of season 3 of House of the Dragon. What did you think about the Battle of the Gullet? Did it live up to your expectations, or were you also angered by the fact that we didn't get this at the end of season 2? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed watching this discussion, and to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more discussions like this in the future. And until the next one, this is Michael, signing off.